Okay, now we have Catarina Krug from the University of Lisbon, and she's going to talk about a model for identifying dairies with poor welfare using a national cattle registration database. Thanks, Catarina. The big green button is for forward anyway. They're going to turn it on for you.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Today I'll tell you about the creation of a model to detect dairies with a higher risk of low welfare. So consumers are increasingly concerned about the welfare of animals, and the administration responds to these pressure by creating laws and by creating also protocols to assess the animal welfare. The problem about these assessment protocols is that generally they are time demanding and human and material resources demanding. And so it would be great to the administration or to the official services to have a model that would be able to detect farms with poor welfare without having to go to all the farms and apply an assessment protocol that is generally very long. And that was what we tried to do in this project. So the first thing that we have to do is to identify the farms with poor welfare, and to do that we used the welfare quality protocol, which is a reference protocol. And then we went searching for potential welfare indicators that were already present in the databases, in the official databases. So the welfare quality protocol is an animal-based protocol, contrary to a lot of other protocols that are based on the housing. And so the welfare quality protocol, the first step is to select the animals randomly. We generally select them at the milking parlor, and we make a first clinical analysis of the animals. We look at the hock lesions, for example, that Kaiserling and we were talking about earlier. And we select those animals, we mark them, and then we go searching for them at the barn to do a second part of the evaluation that includes, for example, the assessment of lameness. Then there is also a group evaluation where we look to the behavior of animals, if they have a lot of agonistic or aggressive behaviors. And we also look to the avoidance distance to see the human-animal relationship, for example. The third part of this protocol is a questionnaire to the farmer, where we get to know a bit more about the management at the farm. For example, the use of anesthetics or anti-inflammatories at the time of dehorning or desbudding. And so in total, it takes about 1 day per farm. After we use those measures that we did to calculate 12 criteria that you can see in blue, and these 12 criteria will be used to calculate a classification of 4 main principles: the good feeding, good housing, good health, and appropriate behavior. And it is the score of these 4 principles that will lead to a final classification of the farm in excellent, enhanced, acceptable, or it is a farm that doesn't reach the minimal welfare requirements, and so it's not classified. And so that's what we did. We applied the welfare quality protocol in 24 farms in Portugal, in center and north of Portugal. The farms were selected by convenience. The majority were between 100 and 400 animals. And in total, we evaluated almost 2,000 animals. And in the end, we obtained the final classification of welfare of these 24 farms, and none was excellent in terms of welfare. 1 was enhanced, the majority were acceptable, 18, and 5 didn't reach the minimal welfare requirements, so they were not classified. And then we separated these into groups: good welfare, which were those that had an enhanced and acceptable level of welfare, and those with poor welfare, which were those not classified. It's these farms that with poor welfare that we want to be able to detect with our model. And so this is the second part, to identify potential welfare indicators present in the database that would be able to detect these farms with poor welfare. So the National Cattle Database of Portugal, or the Portuguese National Cattle Database, has four main tables, which are these four ones. One is live cattle, another is births, another movements, and another slaughter. And based on these four tables and based on the literature review, we were able to identify several potential welfare indicators. Some of them related to reproduction, for example, age at first calving. Some of them related to mortality, for example, mortality rate, and some of them related to the carcass characteristics. For example, a proportion of carcasses with less than 272 kilograms. And so our first question was, is there any of these potential welfare indicators that is significantly different between farms with good and poor welfare? And there were actually two that were significantly different between those two groups. One was sex ratio, and the other one was proportion of on-farm deaths. So the proportion of on-farm deaths was calculated by dividing the number of on-farm deaths by on-farm deaths plus number of slaughtered animal and animal disappearances. And the mean for on-farm deaths among farms with good welfare was of 55%, and among farms with poor welfare was of 85%. This proportion of on-farm deaths was already identified as a potential welfare indicator by other authors like Winkler, De Vries, and Alvassen. And it's generally caused by donor cows, severely lame cows, or severe trauma. Sex ratio, on the other, sex ratio is calculated by dividing number of female cows by number of male cows. We would generally expect that there would be 50% of each. And that was what we found, and as a median for good welfare farms. So the ratio was of 1. However, among farms with poor welfare, the median was 1.8. So there were a lot more female cows that were registered compared to the male cows. The possible reasons for this, the one that we think that is more probable, is that maybe male calves were poorly cared or killed at birth and not registered. Another possibility is that these farms might be using sexed semen, so they would have more female calves. However, in Portugal, that is not very used. Based on the personal communication of George Stilwell, only 5% of the farmers use sexed semen, so we really think that the main possible reason is the first one. And finally, we went to create our model. To create our model, we used a classification method. We used the J48 classifier from the Waikato Environment for Knowledge Analysis. And so we gave to this program all the potential welfare indicators, all the values for the 24 farms, the farms with good and with poor welfare, and we asked the question, which ones of these are able to best discriminate between good and poor welfare farms? And so the program selected on-farm deaths and calving interval higher than 430 days. And so it says it's a decision tree that you can see here. This is the model. And so it says that if the proportion of on-farm deaths is lower than 80%, then the farm is probably, it has probably good welfare. If the proportion of on-farm deaths is higher than 80%, then we look to the calving intervals, the proportion of calving intervals higher than 430. So this model was able to correctly identify 70% of the farms with poor welfare. And so calving interval higher than 430 days was the other potential welfare indicator selected by the model or by the program. and it was calculated just by dividing the number of calving intervals higher than 430 days divided by total of calving intervals. Generally, it might be a result of problems of nutrition, health, or welfare, or it can also be a result of other problems that are not directly related to welfare, such as low estrus detection or ineffective artificial insemination. So there are some authors that actually say that long calving intervals can be advantageous in some high-yielding cows. So as a conclusion, this decision tree, this model, is very easy to apply and to interpret, and it would be really useful in helping official veterinary services in detecting farms that are more likely to have poor welfare, instead of going to all the farms of the country and applying the welfare quality protocol, for example. They would just apply this model to each farm, and then they could only go, for example, to those farms with higher risk of poor welfare. However, of course, this model is not perfect. There are some improvements that could be done. The sample size, as I said, the farms were selected by convenience. We could select a sample that would be more representative of the farms of our country, more balanced, because we had much more farms with good welfare than poor welfare. There are other potential welfare indicators that could be useful, but they weren't present in our database, such as the treatments used on the farm, the milk quality, specific organs rejected at the slaughterhouse. Mortality and fertility variables were already identified by other authors as potential welfare indicators from other countries, such as Sweden and Denmark, for Sanguine and Niemann. And so maybe our model could actually be applied in other countries and not only in Portugal. And finally, if there are other animal production systems, such as poultry or pigs, that have a good protocol to assess welfare and that have a very comprehensive database, maybe we can actually create other models for other production systems that are similar to this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catarina. Yeah, we have time for one or two quick questions, if there are any. Yeah, there's a question just here. Will you just wait for the microphone, please? And maybe you can tell us your name and where you're from. I should have said that earlier, actually. Sorry. They're coming.
Sorry, Inga Boysen from Denmark. When you talk about the interval between calvings, it can be management choice from the farmers on behalf of the farmer. Was there a third parameter which distinguished between good and bad welfare that can be used instead?
Instead of calving intervals higher than 430?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you saw, you're saying regarding reproduction specifically, no?
No.
Okay, no, we as you saw, we had a big list of more than 12 potential welfare indicators, and that one specifically, that was a proportion of calving intervals higher than 430 days, it was selected by the program that we used as one of the best to discriminate between farms with good and poor welfare. So it wasn't our decision to choose that one, it was the decision of the program.
I know, but what was the third parameter that mattered in distinguishing?
Was there a third in the rank? Because I think what the speaker is saying is that one, as you pointed out yourself, could in some cases be a positive for cow welfare. So was there another one below that? What was the next highest ranking?
No, there were only two on that
there were only
model.
Two. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you about what is the fate of male dairy calves in Portugal? Do they go for veal, or like is there a market for them? I'm just wondering about that sex ratio imbalance you found. Is there a market for them? You know what I mean? Or is there no incentive to rear them? And
Yeah, actually, I guess that there are probably other people that are best suited to answer that question. I know that they can be sold, and that is it. I don't know much about that.
okay, it's okay.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you very much, Catarina. Thank you, speaker again.